ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Davu, bringing you a review that has been a long time coming, hasn't it? Last reviewed this game, and I got a lot of hate for it. So I figure, what if I went back? Crash Bandicoot is a fairly known series, so I won't go over the development history of these games, unlike my original review. But I suppose a brief introduction wouldn't hurt to Crash himself, that built a name off of himself since the 90s, all thanks to the original PlayStation Trilogy games made by Naughty Dog. That was back during when the console wars were still a thing, and so these games rivaled the likes of Mario and Sonic, and the original name for the first Crash game was, and I kid you not, was in fact Sonic's Ass Game. Can you imagine? What should we call this one game? Sonic's Ass Game. Brilliant. Jokes aside, I'm glad that wasn't the title they went with. They were very challenging games that tested the player's patience as well as platforming skills. Crash Bandicoot has of course also had a good chunk of spin-offs, from more notably racing games to even spin-offs and games in a sixth generation with the likes of Wrath of Cortex for the PS2/Nintendo GameCube. Flash forward to 2007, and a year later, 2008, there was a time when Activision bought the rights off of Crash Bash and turned him into a brawler. And the follow-up sequel to this, Mutant, went with the open world-like approach. With that whole Skylander Spyro ordeal, which felt like a betrayal to Spyro fans. But I'm getting ahead. Let's go back to Crash. In these two installments, Crash of the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant, I'm reviewing both as one package, as I feel they're both basically the same game. It should be noted they take place after Crash Bandicoot 5, which would be Wrath of Cortex in Crash's series' timeline. Around 6 years ago, I reviewed Crash of the Titans, but since I figured I could review these two games in one go, I figure, why not? So we start with the game that came before it, which put Crash Bash on a major hiatus in the world long before Insane Trilogy, starting with Crash of the Titans. Crash of the Titans is a brawler where you can move fully in 360 degrees, and it starts off rather simple. My favorite mutant out of all the Crash Mutant games has to be Rat Cycle, as it's incredibly iconic. And like Megumin Bandicoot pointed out somewhere out there on YouTube, one of my YouTube followers, shout out, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled should have included him as a playable character, and I'm happy to say that he is the first mutant you come across in Crash Mind Over Mutant, but before that you fight green illusion-based versions of him that Aku Aku made for you, the player, to beat and overcome in order to learn more about the enhanced combat in Mind Over Mutant from Crash of the Titans, and how you dodge, attack, and dodge. And he can also hover in air with a spin move, and in the sequel Mind Over Mutant, he can spin jump, which lets you jump even higher by spinning, pressing square 2 times if you own it on PlayStation, and then press X. In Crash of the Titans, in order to unlock the spin attack, you have to first rescue Aku Aku, who's been kidnapped. That would be like unlocking the jump in Super Mario World. Yes, you guessed it, by our beloved Neo Cortex, who's responsible for his capture. It's about the same on the DS version of the game, though I hear that version of the game is superior, since it is more akin to the original games on the first PlayStation of Crash Trilogy games. Crash's design looks fine, though there are a lot of things people didn't like about Crash's tattoo and overall design back when this game came out. But I think it's safe to say now that people have already moved on. Sadly, Crash Bandicoot 4 sold worse than the Insane Trilogy, just thought I'd throw that out there for the viewers to know. Crash's design in Mind Over Mutant is that of his look-alike from Twinsanity 2005. I like it. You could tell the designers put more love into his design here, being Twinsanity-like. To me, this is how Crash Bash would look like, as I imagined him as a 4-year-old who didn't grow up playing the Naughty Dog games. 9 out of 10 on the design. The shape of his mouth and nose is maybe a tad bit weird if I were to nitpick, which is strange since the Crash of the Titans design didn't seem to have this problem. I'm happy to say, however, that these games have idle animation despite being older games from the 6th generation gaming. I'm looking right at you, Sonic Forces, a game, mind you, that was sold a decade later after these games. I'm happy to say, however, that these games have idle animation despite being older games from the 6th generation in gaming. I'm looking right at you, Sonic Forces, a game, mind you, that was sold a decade later after these games. These games themselves being fairly old at this point, I like these fairy tale-like animations quite a bit, and while their sense of humor isn't exactly my cup of tea, I can appreciate Mind Over Mutant for at least including cartoon-based cutscenes that sometimes reference South Park, Dragon Ball Z, and so on, like parodies of sorts. Also, bringing back Embryo for Mind Over Mutant was an admirable choice, although it came with a mixed reception after games such as Crash Twinsanity, released in 2005. The Mind Over Mutant game is around the same length as Crash of the Titans from 2007. However, because the game has constant backtracking and an open world styled format, it winds up feeling even shorter and suffers because of it, which I think is a real shame, even though it's still around the same length. The major improvement, however, in Mind Over Mutant is that the Titans or mutants can actually jump and solve puzzles that add to the platforming with mutants, such as the magnet, so they add to the overall platforming of the game. For example, you can freeze water to jump on it with a raticle, and finally, the so-called Rhino Roller lets you jump through hoops of enemies and blast through open world in a pinball Sonic-ish kind of fashion, since I'm guessing those loop-de-loops are a nod to that franchise. So that begs the question, are these games worth revisiting in 2024? Replayability-wise, both games offer nostalgia for those who enjoy the Crash Bandicoot series. However, they lack the polish of the recent releases, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Recommendations? For someone diving into the Crash Bandicoot series in 2024, these two games may not be the best starting point due to the dated mechanics and mixed reviews. Crash Bandicoot 4 or even the Insane Trilogy might offer a more satisfying introduction to the series. Ultimately, the choice to revisit these titles or start elsewhere in the Crash series depends on what you're seeking in gameplay. Both games are solid entries, but may not hold up as well against more polished titles in the series today.